What's up, guys? We're live. Welcome back to our Fish the Moment live stream. Sorry for being a few minutes late to the stream today, but I do want to call out, as always, if this is your first time joining one of my live streams, then you may be here on accident. You actually might be trying to watch one of my normal fishing videos that are 10 to 15 minutes long, and so those are going to be a little bit easier to consume than this long, hour-long content where I'm breaking down lakes with Navionics and Google Earth. And if that's what you're here for, then definitely stick around. But if you want to check out a little bit easier to consume video that's maybe 8 to 15 minutes long, go down to my channel. Just go down below my description. You'll be able to find my channel there. And you can actually look at some videos where I talk about fishing strategy, how to read fishing electronics. You'll see me actually on the water fishing, not just behind my desk, all kinds of stuff. And so there's a lot of great videos on my channel, so definitely check those out if you haven't seen any before. But for everyone who is here for the live stream, welcome back. It's great to see everyone here on the stream. I think we got about 17 people on, so hopefully we'll get a few more people on as we go along the stream. And seeing a bunch of people who are always here: JT, Josh, Ulysses, Gregory, Thomas. Got a ton of guys in here as always. Good to see everyone. Clifford, Jesse. So I was just looking through as I was getting ready for this, and I see a couple of people were complaining about the bait and switch on Lake Gunnersville, and apologize for that. I actually was planning on doing Lake Gunnersville just when I was setting up the lakes and stuff like that, because I saw like 3 or 4 times where it was posted, and when I do my random drawing on my Patreon page, I was just like, well, it might get chosen. It didn't. And so I had to change it. I got to keep it fair, guys. And the way I choose my live stream lakes is I basically go over here to my Patreon page, and people will respond to posts on my Patreon page, and they'll have a chance to have their lakes drawn randomly from a list of lakes. And so that's how I decide them. And so as you can see over here over there in the middle right portion of the screen, you'll see the lakes for today's show. We have Kentucky Lake, the Tennessee portion of Kentucky Lake down by Paris. We have the Arkansas River in Muskogee, Oklahoma, and then we have Shoals Lake in Arkansas. And so a pretty diverse group of lakes we get to look at today. So I'm really excited to look at that. And a few other things I kind of want to do as people are getting on is just kind of go through a few housekeeping matters with the community. I'm also going to turn this light so y'all can actually see me. So first up, I know I've been messaging a lot of you guys about doing my map breakdowns, where I actually look at your lakes and break down lakes using Navionics and Google Earth. And I said I was going to have more available April 1st. Well, I put a few of the lake breakdowns up. I can only do about 6 every 2 weeks just because I'm working full time, trying to make videos, trying to do fishing lessons and actually fish. And so that's about all I can do when they take me about an hour and a half a piece. And those 6 breakdowns sold out in less than an hour. And I didn't even post it on social media. I didn't even have a chance. They were all sold out immediately, which is pretty crazy. So what I'm going to be doing is posting more map breakdowns on my website every single or every 2 weeks. So basically on the 15th and the 1st of every month, I'm going to be posting new map breakdowns available for sale on my website, fishthemoment.com. So check that out there. And if you do want your lake looked at, I do have one-on-one fishing lessons that we can look at your lake on a virtual chat. You can talk to me just like this one-on-one, and people have been loving that. Break down your lake, talk about fishing strategy, everything like that. And by the way, thank you so much, Thomas Bonner, for the $2 super chats. It says 100, which is awesome. And actually, Thomas is one of the guys that has lake chosen today. Thomas was the person who recommended Kentucky Lake for the stream today. And then the Arkansas River in Muskogee was recommended by Justin Newell. And then Bull Shoals was recommended by Dan Shoals. So thanks, guys, for those lakes. Couple other things I wanted to run through. One, I do want to give a shout out. I was actually asked to do a shout out in one of my emails, and so I've never been asked to do a picture shout out before, so I thought I might as well do that really quick. Let me pull this up. And I also always am promoting youth fishing, and I was a youth angler when I was younger, and so I know that Kieran Kane is going to be on watching tonight with his dad, and so I just wanted to give a shout out to Kieran. Look at that big old smallmouth. You can see the look on his face. He's super happy, super excited to put that smallmouth in the boat. And I remember the days when I think he's like 10 years old, and I remember the days when I was 10 years old wading in the Milwaukee River up in Wisconsin, catching fish in the streams, and I caught like a 4-pound smallmouth and thought that was amazing. So I was really excited about that. Wow, Thomas, $100 super chat. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that. I guess that's what the 100 was before. Just completely busted the top donation there right away, which is awesome. Bruce Clayton actually took that spot last time with $51, and now Thomas, you got the top spot. So appreciate that so much, man. Really do, and got everything going. So really appreciate that. And so I'm going to now switch over to my Google Earth, and let me switch that really quick and make sure that you can all see this. So we'll transition over here. Awesome. And then we're going to pretty much jump straight into it and start talking about Kentucky Lake. And Thomas, again, was the guy who recommended Kentucky Lake. And when he was talking about my Patreon page, he actually had some really interesting thoughts where he basically was asking, well, I love the videos, but I'm having trouble applying what you're talking about to my home lake. And so what I want to do is kind of walk through and break down the Paris, Tennessee area of Kentucky Lake, from the Paris, Tennessee area down, I think it was like the Danville Granary elevator or something. It's like right around this area. I don't really know what that means, but there's basically, it's the very lower end of Kentucky Lake. I'm going to kind of look at this whole general area here, show you where these fish are going to be in the pre-spawn and the spawn. So Thomas was saying that the lake right now is down at winter pool, which means it'll be lower than normal, but it'll probably be rising here in the next few weeks going into April. So I'm going to break it down as I would fish it, like let's say this weekend, where the water might still be a little bit cold, fish are still in that pre-spawn mode, and also talk about it as you're transitioning into the spawn. And as always, I want to make sure that I share with you guys this easy graphic when we're talking about the spawn. And right now, most of you guys are either in the pre-spawn or the spawn period, and we have the pre-spawn period where the water temperatures are about 50 to 60 degrees in general, and that's when the fish are going to be halfway back in the creeks and the bays. And the spawn is when water temperatures are between 60 and 70 degrees, and those fish are actually getting up onto the beds. And so that's what we're going to be talking about right now, is that transition from that pre-spawn to the spawn period here on Kentucky Lake. And so if we look at Kentucky Lake, it's a giant reservoir. And if you actually can scroll back in time on Google Earth using this feature, whoops, not that feature, using the feature here at the clock with the arrow pointing to the left, we can do that. We can take off all these places and zoom in. And you can actually see this lake at different times of the year. And you'll notice that in general, Kentucky Lake is pretty dirty on the lower end, and it gets clearer as you go up towards the dam. But with the exception of this creek, which actually stays really clear pretty much all the time. And I think that's actually really interesting that this creek stays super clear. And it's something that I would definitely pay attention to on any lake in the country. If you can find creeks that stay consistently clear over the years, I mean, I'm going between 2011, 2010, I'm going all these different times of year in December, going back all the way to 2007, you can see this creek stays clear. And the way you can tell it's clear water is because the water here is a lot darker on the screen. And if you see this basically dark black water, and this area is very brown and muddy. And the fish will get in that dirty, muddy water in the spring, but they love to spawn in this clear water because it's a little bit better quality water for them to lay their eggs. And again, the bass will spawn in 6 inches of water that has zero visibility, like a 2 inches visibility, but they prefer to spawn in the clear water. And so we take this back up here to the most recent image, 2015. You notice again, this area is very clear in this area of the lake. I'm actually going to skip back because it's a little bit cloudy in this image. Bear with me for 1 second. Okay, we'll go with... Wow, there's a lot of cloudy images. Give me 1 second, guys. I need to find going. There we go. We'll use this one from 2008. It probably was best at that first image I was using. Basically, so what they want to do, and Angler at Large is asking a good question. He says, do the bass actually move that far to find clear water? And they will move pretty good distance to find clear water. They will, go out of their way to try to find some clear water, whether that's moving a creek down the way or just moving off the main lake back into these creeks to find the clearer water. If we look at this image here, you can see that some of these creeks back down the lower end are a little bit clearer, but this is definitely later or earlier in the year, so we're looking at like the end of the summer. But if we continue to go back, you can see that the main river is pretty much chocolate milk, and as you move back in these bays, you can find some clear water, especially like down in here. And this is caused by some of this grass that's in the lake. And I don't know if this grass is still in this area. If we go back up a little bit, you can see that the lake now is at Winter Pool, and it's further down, and you can see that was some grass in here, but there's some nice little ditches and drains back in here. And so this water is going to be a little bit clearer back in these bays, and so these bass will take the time to move off the main lake back into these a little bit cleaner areas. And if it's really muddy out here in this pocket, like let's say here, and the bass are coming off this main river, instead of stopping in this pocket to try to spawn, they might move all the way back into the back of this pocket where you find a little bit clearer water. But one thing I did want to say is that if you do have questions, I will be answering them throughout the stream. And if you need a question responded to, just put @FishTheMoment like you see Ian Wagner did, where he says, "Got the GoPro in the mail, buddy." Thank you so much, man, for that. Appreciate you sending out the GoPro, and it was great meeting you at the Classic. And also put some question marks at the end like Angler at Large did. So a bunch of question marks plus @FishTheMoment will ensure that I see your question and make sure that it's not just discussion between you guys, it's actually a question. And so basically what I'm looking for, Thomas, on Kentucky Lake, or a lake like this where you have a river system and the main lake has a lot of current pushing through it in the springtime and in the post-spawn, is I'm looking for places where the fish can pretty easily move off of the main river, get into a spawning area where they can spawn quickly, and then they can move right back out to the main river. And so if we look at the lake right here, you can see that there's several creeks where these bass can do this. They can do this in this creek right here. They have this whole big bar right here where there's actually some grass back in here, which looks really good, and the big bay back here they can spawn. They can also spawn back in some of these smaller little creeks, or even back up in this area in these creeks. So there's lots of areas for those fish to pull off and spawn in. And really what you're looking for, again, those spawning areas, is places that are protected from the wind and the current. And so this area is probably my favorite of all these areas, because it's really hard for the wind coming from either the north, the south, the east, or the west. So you have a north wind, you have an east wind, south wind, or west wind to really affect this pocket. The only wind that would really hurt this pocket here is a strong east wind, and all of these islands out front will protect the mouth of this pocket, making it really protected and great to find spawning bass. And really that wind, all it's going to do is cool down the water. It's going to hurt the water clarity, and it's just going to stir up all the bottom and stuff and just make it harder for those bass to spawn. And so as far as trying to find fish this time of year, Thomas, when you're trying to go out there and actually catch fish, and you're like, okay, I've seen your videos, look for protected pockets, look for areas where you can get protected out of the wind, stuff like that that's a little bit vague as far as fishing information goes, and stuff you may have heard other channels or other people talk about in TV shows, stuff like that. How do you then take that and actually go find a pocket that has fish? Or if you assume that there's a bunch of fish in this pocket, how do you find the one bank that has those fish in it? So what I want to talk about is, this is a pretty good area. Thomas, what I would say is, pretty much any of these little pockets off the main lake are going to be places where those fish may spawn. So I'm going to focus on this particular area for you, especially since this is down at Winter Pool and it looks pretty good. And so what I'm basically going to be looking for are migration routes where the fish can move from the main lake, which is right out here, the main river on Kentucky Lake, back into a spawning area like this back bay. And so when the water temperatures start creeping up into the 50-degree range, they may be in the 40s all winter because of that really cold water and the cold temperatures in Kentucky and Tennessee, and this main river might be 40, 45, 46 degrees. And so what you can do basically is look for areas where these bass can follow some sort of creek or a drain or a ditch back into these spawning areas back in here. And so what I'm looking for in here is I'm looking for places very similar to a little drain like this right here, or another drain that comes in right here. There's another drain that's pretty obvious that comes in right through here, where these bass could actually spawn behind this island because it's pretty protected on all sides from all the wind. They could even spawn back up in here. Or a drain something like this. And if you notice, there's some mud flats. There's also a little bit of grass down the edges of these kind of old creek channels that wind through here. And what I would do is I would start out here on the main river, and I would fish a bait like a chatterbait, a lipless crankbait, or a deep dive, or like a medium diving crankbait, depending on how deep it is. And I would just cover water and start fan casting all these areas out in front of the mouth of this ditch where it meets the main lake. Work my way into this ditch, casting down the edges of this ditch in here. And a lot of people think, okay, 50-degree water, that's still really cold. These fish aren't going to be up shallow. I need to fish out in the center of this ditch. And a lot of times that's not the case, especially when the water temperature is warming up a ton. Those bass can actually pull up right in the center or right on the edges of this ditch. When you get 2 or 3 sunny days in a row and that water temperature is really warming up, these fish will get in 6 inches of water to a foot of water, even in the end of February or the middle of March, when air temperatures are 30 degrees, but you have a nice sunny day. And you'll be shocked how many fish you can catch in the pre-spawn in a foot, 2 foot of water. And so I always try to make casts down the edges of these ditches up in shallow water, and then also make a few casts out in the center of these ditches. And if you have a cold front that comes through that drops water temperatures, or it's a cold, cloudy, windy day, I may fish more in the center of these ditches rather than on the edges. But then I would work pretty quick. I would put the trolling motor on 4 or 5 out of 10 and just start fan casting this whole area. And really what I'm doing is just looking for a bite. And I know I can catch fish on a crankbait, a chatterbait, or a spinnerbait even on the edge of these ditches or in the center of these ditches pretty easily if I get the bait around them. And especially on lakes like this, which is kind of like Lake Gunnersville as well. Lake Gunnersville and Kentucky Lake are both on the Tennessee River, so these tips will apply to both reservoirs. What you're looking for is a group of fish that's moving off this main lake, that's moving together back into this bay and all the way back into this spawning bay or spawning creek kind of. And so again, places to look are like right here, you have a nice long point that sticks out that may have a little bit of grass up on top, and the grass will hold heat that will get those bass really fired up and will hold them on that area. And just work your lipless crankbait fan casting across this point all the way out here into the deep water. Work your way down this ditch over here and work pretty quick. Don't spend a ton of time making a lot of casts in the same spot. Make a cast here, make a cast 20 feet this way, make a cast 20 more feet the other way. And normally what you'll find is that those bass will be stacked up in about a 20 to 30 yard stretch of grass. So sometimes they'll get in really tiny wads. So sometimes you have to really, kind of get lucky almost to hit them on the head. They'll get in one very particular spot. But most of the time, if you're really finding a good school, they'll be spread out like all along this point here, for example, and you can catch them by just making longer fan casts. And whenever you get a bite, definitely make sure you mark that spot, especially if you're fishing around grass, because those fish will stack up in the grass. And so work my way down this ditch. I might work into here, I might work around here, up on the shallow bar, back into here, fish down this edge, maybe hop over here and fish down this edge, work my way all the way back into this creek. Then what I'm going to do is, that's probably going to hold me, and the fish are probably going to be somewhere between here and here, all the way from about mid-February to about mid-March. And then once that water starts to rise and the water's not at winter pool anymore, you get some rain, the lake starts to fill back up, and basically we go back to having the lake kind of at full pool. What you want to look for, let me pull up an image where it's not just completely awful. So what you want to look for, you can see these ditches have now disappeared completely. I'm sorry, I'm just looking for one more better image. Maybe there's not one. Okay, that's fine. We'll use this one. So you can see those ditches now have disappeared. You can't see them. Maybe you can see a few like right in here, but when that water comes up, you can't see those ditches. But you can see that there's some really nice shallow grass now forming up in the back of these bays, all back up in here or down these banks. And you can also see there's some nice like chunk rock boat ramps or some lay down trees, more lay down trees off this point. All really good areas for those fish to set up in the pre-spawn when those water temperatures start to get up into the 55-degree range and the water's rising and flooding up on the bank. And so what I'm really looking for are points, steeper little banks where these fish can pull up and they can get on shallow lay down, shallow grass, things like that. And I'm going to fish again fast with a crankbait, a spinnerbait, a chatterbait, maybe flip a jig, off these points looking for some spots that have some fish. And a lot of times, if you get into a creek like this and you start catching them off this point, they're going to be kind of all down the banks in that general area. It's not like they're going to pull up on one point, catch a 5-pounder, and then not catch a single fish in the rest of that creek. That hardly ever happens in the spawn. And then basically, once you get to those water temperatures into the 60-degree range, what I'm going to be looking for are places where it's very flat, like this area here, but have a little bit of deep water running into them. So you see there's a small little ditch right here, a small little ditch right here. This is a perfect little spawning area on a Kentucky lake, on a Guntersville, places like that. Because basically what these fish will do is they'll like to pull up into these flat, shallow areas to spawn, but at the same time, they want to have the protection of a little bit deeper water in case they get a cold front, and that cold front drops water temperatures from 60, 61 back down to, let's say, 58, 57 degrees. And those fish can just pull right off this bank here, right in this little ditch, and hang out. And you can also catch fish in these type of little ditches and drains in the pre-spawn when the water temperatures are 57, 56, 57 degrees right before those fish commit to spawn. And you catch some fish doing that. And then really all I'm going to be doing is just flipping all of these bushes, flipping all of the trees around these ditches and drains. There's isolated bushes out here. There's isolated big trees out here, or as the water starts to flood, it'll get back up into this area, and you can catch some really good fish. But the key is looking for these really flat areas where, if you look at this map here, it's very exposed bank. And if we switch over really quick to, let me switch over to Navionics super fast. Switch over to Navionics. We go to that same pocket, which is right in here. You can see this area where I'm looking. Right in here, you can actually see that creek that came in here on our map. But look how flat this area is. It's 4 foot of water, 3, 2, 1, nothing. It's super flat area, and there's those little tiny creeks, those little tiny ditches that fed in there. And then here you have a nice steep bank. And so these are the places I'll look when the water temperatures are 54, 55 degrees, looking for the steeper banks that are close to these really flat areas. And so you have steep bank, flat bank, pre-spawn, spawn. And if we continue that trend as we go down here, you can see steeper bank right in here. Contour lines are kind of close together. Contour lines are kind of close together. Then you have a really flat bank where the contour lines are really spread apart. This is the flatter areas where those bass will spawn. Same thing as going back in here. Really big, nice flat area, but you have some contour lines that converge on this point. So this is a little steeper point, a good pre-spawn area. And then as you move back into here, this is where those bass will spawn, where the contour lines are really spread apart and really flat. So that's kind of how I would break that down. And the way I would kind of fish that, again, start out on the main lake, work my way in, and cover a ton of water. The big thing with fishing in the spring is a lot of times it's hard to graph those fish, especially on a dirty water lake where you have like 1 foot to 2 foot of visibility. A lot of times it's not worth trying to graph for them too much. A lot of times it's just better, especially when the water temperatures get into the low to mid 50s, just to pick up a moving bait, crankbaits, spinnerbaits, chatterbaits, cover water and fish and fish and fish until you find a group of fish, find where they are positioned in these creeks, or find a good little bank that has them. And there's a lot of pockets you can fish, so you can do this here. If you don't find them in here and you fish here, try to fish this pocket and creek for maybe 3 hours, 2-3 hours. If you don't find them, run over to this creek and do the exact same thing. Follow that creek out into the main area, fish some of the steeper banks and things like that. I've talked a lot about pre-spawn fishing on my stream, so hopefully you guys will know kind of the areas to look for on pre-spawn areas. I also talk about a lot in my videos. If you haven't checked out a lot of my videos, definitely go back and watch some of my previous live streams where the thumbnail says pre-spawn areas. It'll explain exactly what to look for, and a lot of that stuff applies to pretty much any lake in the country. And fish those pre-spawn areas, then work your way back in these creeks and go from the steep banks here to the flat banks here, and try to see if the fish are on the steep banks. If they're not on the steep banks, work your way out to the shallow banks here. And really straightforward, really easy in this time of year to find those fish. It's just about covering water and putting your bait in as many places as possible. So that was a very over time description of Kentucky Lake. Actually, I'm right on time. I think we should be good. So want to quickly go through a few questions. Just got a bunch of guys talking here, and then hopefully that all made sense. Thomas, I see you said thank you, so I'm glad that helped out and worked what you need to do. And then I'm going to jump over here to the Arkansas River in Muskogee, Oklahoma. Hopefully I can find the Arkansas River in Muskogee, Oklahoma. Actually, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to pull this map up, and I'm hoping that someone who knows what they're talking about will be able to show me where Muskogee Pool is, because I think I know where it is. And I'm really close to Muskogee, so I probably should know where this is, but I actually don't. I'm not 100%, so let me make sure that I'm looking at the right thing. So here's the Muskogee, Oklahoma's right here. So I'm thinking that the Arkansas River, Muskogee, is here. This is the Arkansas River in Muskogee Pool. I'm thinking this is what they're talking about. If anyone knows, please let me know in the chat. If not, it may be this part of the, but I think this is actually like an actual lake. Because here you have Kerr, I fish Kerr all the time, and you have Fort Gibson, I fish Fort Gibson all the time up here. And we also have 10 Killer Ferry Lake. So I fished all those. I think this is its own reservoir for some reason. I feel like this is the Arkansas River Muskogee. Either way, I kind of looked at both just to kind of make sure I was looking at something, but let me know in the comments which one it is, and that would be super helpful. If it's, this is option one, the skinny creek, and then this is, I don't know, this is the bottom bigger area. If it's the bottom area on the south of Muskogee, let's say, tell me the river's south of Muskogee or the river's north of Muskogee. North, south, that would be super helpful. Thank you. Okay, so what I want to do real quick is just run through these comments while everyone's doing that. Let's see here. Bunch of guys are in here. Sorry guys, I'm just trying to read through here. Seeing just a bunch of great comments, great people talking. Appreciate all the conversation, stuff like that, and water temperature things. Thomas, thanks for letting me know the water temperature was 57. So definitely those fish are going to be further back in the creeks. Apparently that's Lick Creek. Interesting name there. And then, let's see here. So many great comments here. JP, he said, "What's up? So glad I made it to one of the live streams. It's been a while." Michael says, "Greatest channel ever." And will electronics not work in dirty water? That's Mr. Air Great. Not necessarily. The electronics work perfectly fine in the dirty water. The thing is that the fish in really dirty water, when the water visibility is less than a foot of water, a lot of times it's hard to see them on your electronics in the pre-spawn because the fish will just get really shallow. They'll get near the bank, and it's hard to pick them out when they're in 2, 3, 4 feet of water. The only way I really use my electronics to find fish is if the fish are in, let's say, 7 to 8 to 9 feet of water. They need to be in about 7 to 9 feet of water for me to start picking out fish on my electronics really consistently. You can use your electronics to scan for stumps that are in 2 or 3 foot of water or rocky bottom that's in 2 or 3 foot of water. But really, that's scanning for cover and structure, not scanning for fish. And so if you're wanting to find fish in dirty water, you need to wait till it's like the summertime or maybe even the winter time when those fish get a little bit deeper. But in the spawn, pre-spawn, they're moving up really shallow right when water temperatures hit about 50 degrees. Hope that kind of makes sense. And then, Fisherman, what's your favorite moving bait to fish early spring? Lipless crankbait for sure. And then behind that is a chatterbait. That's probably the best thing. At least what I would throw. And then let's see here. They meet east. The ramps are called Three Forks Ramp. Right there, the tributaries meet. Okay. Let's see here. Start at Three Forks for River. Okay. So I think it goes north. Arkansas is on the left. Grand's on the right. Arkansas River is Muskogee. Is the Muskogee south? Okay. And so that hopefully makes sense. So this is the Muskogee. Arkansas River Muskogee is right here, right at the Three Forks apparently. And so maybe it goes this way, maybe it goes this way. I'll just go this way a little bit, and I'll go this way a little bit. And we'll see what happens. Also, by the way, if JT is on, flash the moment. Just saying. Other than that, so let's start here in Muskogee. So at least I can give you an idea of what I would do on the Arkansas River. I can give you some backwater areas and stuff I would fish. So this time of year, basically, if you're going to be fishing on a river system, Arkansas River, you're going to fish the Red River in Louisiana, or you're going to be up south fishing the Potomac River, places like that. Wherever you have a tidal fishery that's dirty, or you have a river system that's not a tidal river, but it's just dammed up, and you have current rolling through, these fish are going to want to get into backwater areas. And what is a backwater? A backwater is basically any place that's off of the main river. So in this case, I would consider this as a backwater. It's a very small backwater, but a backwater of the Arkansas River Muskogee, I think. And one thing that's nice about these backwaters is first, they're protected from the strong current that's pushing through this river system. And bass don't like to spawn on the main river of a river system just because the current's so strong it can wash away their eggs really easily, and the water's really kind of muddy and dirty most of the year. And so it's a lot easier for these fish. They probably can spawn on the main river, but they probably are just not as easy. But it's way easier to spawn like back in a backwater like this for a couple reasons. One, the water is going to be a little bit shallower, which means it's going to warm up faster, making it better for those fish to spawn. They'll spawn earlier in there. Second is that it's protected from all the current and the wind, which is great because it'll warm up that water again, make it a little bit easier for those fish to actually lay their eggs. And third, these little backwaters are going to have clearer water because they're a little bit further off the main river. And so Gabe says that's correct. Okay, cool. So we're good here. And so places I like to look for on the Arkansas River are places I call sneaky holes. And I don't like to just go and try to find the easiest looking areas on a river system, because a lot of times people can just say, okay, I'm going to roll into this backwater. I'm going to run in the back of this little pocket. This little pocket looks great back in here. It has some shallow water. There's a bunch of laydowns. I'm sure there's some fish that spawn back up in here, but it's really easy to find. And if you get a lot of tournament guys who know what they're doing, they're going to run into that stuff all the time. And then there's also these giant backwaters like this stuff here, where you could work your way all the way back up into like a creek like this, but there's just so much water to cover that it's really hard to figure out where those fish are going to be. These backwaters are massive. And so really what I like to do is I like to look around the river. So I'm going to run down this direction, and I'm going to look for islands, and I'm going to look for basically the areas where I get a lot of big open space. So if you look right here, we have some nice big islands in this area. These are the type of areas I'm looking for on the river systems, especially if you're fishing around like Lake Dardanelle, the Little Rock Pool, Maumelle Pool, Pool 6 and 7 and 8 on the Arkansas River. Look for these type of big island areas, because these are the areas that are actually really good, and they're kind of like, again, the sneaky holes that I like to look for. And why do I think that they're called sneaky holes? Well, one, if you look back in here, you have a super, super shallow water. And back in the back, you have a nice little pond that's protected and has nice clean water right off the main river. This spot is really easy for the fish to move in and move out of when they want to move up to spawn. And it's also like dirt shallow. You can see it's super, super, super shallow. And these fish will move up here and they will spawn in these type of areas in 6 inches of water and a foot of water. And it's crazy. When you fish tournaments, you'll see guys all up in here. And a lot of times, you might have to wait for the water to get a little bit like higher to get like right in here. You can see the water is raised up a little bit, so you can actually run back into some of these areas. But basically, these fish will just spawn out in these little, basically clear water pockets around these islands. And what they'll do is they'll, in the pre-spawn, transition back in these islands, and they'll make their way back in here. And you can pick those fish off, fishing the stumps and the logs and everything out here in the front of this little spawning pocket with a square bill, with a spinner bait, stuff like that. And if you have like lily pads in here, you can fish the lily pad stems, even in a foot to 2 foot of water, and crush them. And basically what I'm looking for, again, in these areas are places where I can see clear water, but I want an area that's a little bit sneakier than that. That's an easy area to find. So if we really want to find a true sneak hole, we have to look for an area like this. Now this is a genuine sneak hole back in here. And these type of areas, if you look at this, you have a log jam, you have this creek that runs in here, and you're like, man, you could never get back in here. This is impossible. And if you really want a real sneak hole, whenever that river gets really high, try to get back up into this thing. Whenever you can get a flooded river system, that's a real sneak hole when the water is high in a river. But basically what these little channels and stuff do, this happens all on Lake Dardanelle, guys will run this at like, it's going to be like a foot of water, like literally a foot of water back in here. Guys will run off the main river, full plane, 60, 70 miles an hour, and they're 21-foot bass boats, and they'll run all the way back in, so they get into here, and then it's going to drop off like right here. Looks like there's some grass and stuff here, but I don't actually know. That might be Yeah, so like they run in here, you can see there's water here, and they'll run this, and it's super, super, super shallow, like inches of water back in here. But when the river's high enough, they might be able to just sneak it in there, and they'll shut down like in this area, and then they'll fish this, and this might be 2 foot of water, just enough water for them to take out, and then they'll take off again and run, and they'll catch 15, 16, 17 pounds of fish in this tiny little area, and then they'll run right back out. And this, you might not even be able to take your trolling motor through these areas, but these are the places that when you see the locals catching like 18, 20 pounds on these river systems, and you're like, where are they fishing? They're fishing these sneak holes. This is where these guys are fishing. And it's really scary running these. Actually, I was going to fish one of these in Lake Dardanelle the other day, and I was going to run on plane back in there. And as I was about to do it, a guy came screaming out of there, and you can only get in that area running on plane. And we literally, if I would have run in there, I would have had like a head-on collision. But basically, if you don't want to mess with that, you can look for places like this. Like, again, here, this little shallow little area. And you think, man, I'm kicking up mud. I'm in 6 inches of water back in here, or not 6 inches, but like 1.5 feet, 2 foot of water. These fish would never be back in here. I'm like, a quarter mile or a half mile from 4 foot of water. But you have no idea how many giant fish will pull back way, way, way back in these super shallow areas on these islands and sit there all spring long. And so if we look at a few more little sneak holes on the river, that's just a few right there I found beforehand. You can also run back up into some of these creeks, but these are not really what I'm looking for. Where else would let me see if I can find a few more sneak holes on the river for you guys. Like back in here, you can see there's a nice big open area in here. This is going to be a really good spawning area where you can just run back in here. You can flip these, nice roads. You can fish around this old road bed that runs through here, fish the sides of that. That's going to warm up quicker because there's rock there. You could catch them. Also catch them just down some of this flooded grass or off these points. You can probably just work your way back into these areas and just flip. And, actually there's a nice little discharge back in here, which is kind of interesting. But you can just run back in these areas and just flip and catch fish, fishing down these roads and things like that. And these are probably big community holes that everyone's fishing. But again, if you can get into those little sneak holes, and normally the best sneak holes are on the bottom end of a pool. They're not either the bottom end or they're going to be at the very top of a pool. But a few more little sneak holes that I'm just seeing that might be interesting is, again, maybe back up like if you can get your boat here, that's a little sneak hole that you could run into. You could run your boat from here right back in there. It's a little spot. Maybe back up in here. The water doesn't really look that clear back in here, but it might be clear at some point. Even way back up in this area, this is probably a really good spawning area just because it has that grass back in there, which is going to keep the water clear, though there is a lot of water to cover back in there. And then if we come back in here, you can jump that. Oh, you can just run right there. Is there anything back in there? Nah. Not really. Okay, so really what you're looking for, though, is you want to find an area where there's really good, clean water. So if we run back up and go up to some of the stuff I was showing up here, this is a different pool, but we'll just kind of give you another idea of what these sneak holes would look like. If you run back up in this area, back up here, this stuff, you can see the water's a little bit clearer. There's some grass back in here. This is a good little spawning area way back in this creek. And you may have to, again, run this to get back in there, but that's a little sneak hole you can run to. I'm saying that term a lot. I hope people aren't turning all of my catchphrases into drinking games because you guys would literally be dead at the moment. But anyways, hope that all made sense. Hope I'm looking at the right pool of the river, and hopefully that's kind of a good idea of what I'm looking for. Again, when you get back in these areas, there's probably a ton of people asking, what are you fishing back in there? My number one bait is the Gary Yamamoto Cinco, especially on the river system. I throw the black and blue with gold flake Cinco because these areas are dirt shallow. It's all just mud. And so those fish are going to either spawn on the base of cypress trees, on the base of grass roots, like the roots of grass or reeds or stuff back there, or any stumps you can find back there. Though most of these areas don't have a ton of stumps, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. And so those are the areas I'm looking at on the Muskogee pool, Arkansas River, any pool of the Arkansas River in general, or on the Red River, places like that. And again, you can catch fish back in these big bays. There's fish all in these giant backwaters. But if you really want to get on some good fish, hit those sneak holes with those boat noises. You have to make the boat noises too if you're going back in those areas. So, anyways, that's what I would do. I'm kind of a river rat myself, so I love just like finding the good old sneak hole sometimes, and you know, throwing my worm down that sneak hole. So, um, what I want to do now is look at the last lake, which is Bull Shoals Lake in Arkansas. And we're going from Kentucky Lake, which is a big, like, giant river system on the Tennessee River. We're going that to the Muskogee Arkansas River, which is a narrow, skinny river, to a super deep, clear lake that's like the I don't know, the clearest lake probably, other than maybe I can't think of any actually. It's probably the clearest lake in Arkansas. So very big shift. So we're gonna have to think about, we're not throwing our jigs, our chartreuse spinner baits, our super flashy vibrating baits, or are we? That is the question. So one thing that I like to do on the lake, like a Bull Shoals reservoir, just because I am kind of like to go against the grain, is I love to fish these areas in the dirty water. So these lakes, I love to run up in the dirty water on these lakes, look for the bigger largemouth. And Bull Shoals is awesome because it has a really good mixture of good largemouth. It has, I think, some smallmouth bass in it. I'm pretty sure it does have smallmouth. And then it has spotted bass. And I know it has smallmouth in it. And so I want to give you a quick rundown of what I'm looking for. First, I'm going to show you some areas just on Google Earth where I would find some largemouth. Then I want to talk to you about some areas using Navionics where I would find some smallmouth spawning and some good transition areas for that pre-spawn to spawn transition that we're in right now. So one thing I would definitely do is make sure I run way up one of these rivers at least one time in the spring to try to find some dirty water and try to find some big largemouth. And it's pretty interesting that, a lot of guys don't think to do this. I don't really know why on these deep, clear lakes. You always find a few guys who do, but a lot of guys are like, well, if we went up the river, I'm just going to find a bunch of little tiny bass. But I do want to show you one spot where I've actually fished on Bull Shoals it was like the late spawn and the post spawn, and we were crushing good largemouth, like 2, 3, 4 pounders back at the creek, and they kind of disappeared on this tournament day, which is kind of a bummer, but we still ended up catching some good fish. So if you run up Bull Shoals, you run up this creek, and you run way up here, and you keep running, and you keep running, and 1 second, I need to switch this to different view. Here we go. You keep running. You run all the way up here. You run underneath this bridge. You keep running. And okay, you come over here. I know you guys are loving these boat noises, or you're hating it. I have no idea. But anyways, this is an area back in here where I was crushing them. And it's a really cool area because it's basically the only really dirty water that you'll see on Bull Shoals. I'm not really finding a really good image of where the water's dirty. It's really not that dirty compared to a lot of lakes. You still have like 1 foot to 2 foot of visibility back in here, maybe even 3 foot in some places, but this is good enough, I guess. And so what I like to do on Bull Shoals is basically run back into these creeks and fish some of these shallower, flatter banks with bushes. And there's actually some really nice bushes out here. It's really hard to see them, but if you look right here, there's actually lines of bushes down this way. You can kind of barely see some bushes. There's lines of offshore bushes out here that those fish will pre-spawn in. You can catch them on spinner baits, catch them on crankbaits, flipping with jigs. There's also some really good just banks down here where there's just bushes everywhere. And those fish, when the water temperatures get about 55 degrees and you get some sunny days and warm days, those fish will pull up in those bushes. You can just catch them flipping, throwing a spinner bait, fishing a fluke, just crushing them back in here. And then there's also some really big, deep trees out here you can't really see, but they're underwater that those fish will pre-spawn in as well. You catch them on jerk baits, Alabama rigs out here in front of this big spawning area. And those fish will spawn back in these bushes, all up and down this bank, and then they'll also pre-spawn out in these trees. And basically what you can do is just, in this pre-spawn, when the water temperatures are 50, 55 degrees, fish out here a little bit further off the bank on some of these, maybe even some steeper rocky banks like you see right here, fishing something like a storm wigglewort or a crankbait, and try to fish some like an Alabama rig down the steep rocky banks like we've talked about for pre-spawn fish before. But then once those fish start to get ready to spawn, pull up into these super shallow pockets and catch them flipping. You can flip pretty much anything you want, a tube, a jig, a beaver bait, whatever it is, and these fish will definitely get back in these creeks, and they'll also get way up here into some of this stuff, where you can see there is a ton of shallow water, but there's a ton of good flooded cover that these fish will get in, and it's always fun to run up these rivers and catch some good fish. So that's kind of one thing you can do, very easy fishing. The other thing you can do, if we switch over, I feel like I haven't used Navionics at all, by the way, today, guys. I don't know if y'all are like gonna revolt because I'm not using Navionics. I apologize for that. We're actually still on Kentucky Lake. Wow. Anyways, Bull Shoals. This is Fort Gibson. This is Bull Shoals. Bull Shoals. The other thing I would be doing is I would be fishing down in the mid-lake section of Bull Shoals. So that's like my second go-to. And you can actually, one thing I do want to talk about is you can actually run way up this river again, up this way, and start fishing in the actual river up here and just fishing down some of the steeper rocky banks up this river where the creek channel swings in to all of these points and swings away from these points. And so if you look like right here, you have the main river channel, and it swings in like this, and it swings into these small little points, and then it swings away from the bank, and it swings back in on that point, swings away, swings back into these points. These points right here where that creek channel swings in, those are really good pre-spawn areas that those fish will get in. You can catch them on Alabama rigs, fishing crankbait, stuff like that. And then you can also catch them back into some of these little creek arms, and just, again, fishing the steeper banks that have chunk rock or rock transitions where you go from a chunk rock or like a ledge rock or like really steep flat rock to a chunk rock where you have broken rock that's kind of bigger rocks to pea gravel. And you can find these transitions just by looking on your map for places. Let me find one real quick. And probably to talk about this up here, but finding places where you have a flat area like this flat point coming into a steeper bank. This is a really steep bank, so those contour lines are really close together. This is a flatter point, and you can start fishing a crankbait down where it transitions from this flat bank or this flat point to this steep bank, and crank that and catch some really good fish, or just fish a jig down that, especially when the water temperatures are still 50 to 57, 58 degrees. And then these fish will actually start pushing into these little shallow pockets. You can catch them flipping out in the backs of these pockets. You can also fish a Senko, fish a floating worm, or pretty much really any shallow spawning baits that you want to fish around the bank for spawning bass. You can find bass spawning in these pockets, stuff like that. And then you can also run back in some of these bigger creeks, and you can actually go and fish some of these like old road beds and submerged bridges and stuff. And I think one of these creeks up here, one of these two creeks, is where Brandon Polnick actually won. I think it may have been right here, where Brandon Polnick won a Bassmaster Elite Series event fishing one of these bridges with a DT16, and he was catching fish on Bull Shoals way up the river up here in the back of one of these creeks, and these fish were setting up on this road bed back here, and he was crushing them on a deep diving crankbait in like late March, early April, when the water temperatures were still 50, 55 degrees. And so those are some of the areas these guys are fishing. Again, guys are fishing these channel swing banks where the channel swings in, like right here, and then it starts to swing out. So swings into this bank right here and then starts to swing out to the shallow pocket. They'll fish the steep bank to where it gets shallower, and then follow those fish back when it gets to be 60-degree water back in this pocket. So work that transition bank. Those are so key on the Ozark Lakes, are just those transition banks. And so that's kind of what I would do. The second thing, I would kind of run up further up the river, this area of the lake, or up in this area of the lake. And then if for whatever reason I didn't feel like doing either of those things, last thing I would do is stay way down the lake, and I would start looking for really flat banks on the lower end of this lake. For example, this bank right here, where you have a nice rounded point, and it's very flat on this bank, and it goes from 2 down to 12 foot of water. And these type of areas are great places to catch spawning smallmouth bass. And if you watch any of the Bassmaster Elite Series events they've had on Bull Shoals, right when the water temperatures start to get good for spawning bass, like let's say 56 to 58, those smallmouth actually start spawning. And smallmouth spawn a little bit sooner than the largemouth. They spawn in about 58-degree water, 57 to 58-degree water. And because the water clarity down on Bull Shoals is like 10 feet on the lower end, those bass will spawn in 10 feet of water, no problem. And they won't spawn on the bank. They'll spawn in these really flat banks like this. And basically what you can do is sit your boat out here in 20, 25, 30 feet of water, cast up into 5 feet of water, and drag baits like a tube or a shaky head or a drop shot back to the boat. And basically you're not able to see those fish. You're not really sight fishing for them. You're just fan casting. And a lot of these good places are like places that lead into a pocket where you have a point. This is a really good looking spot right here for it. But basically, you're just fan casting this whole area, working that shaky head back through there. And a lot of times when you find a good productive bank, especially on bull shoals, you can catch like 30 fish in one little stretch of bank. And you'll fish, and then you'll find a little stretch that's just loaded. And so again, don't spend too much time just fishing everything. Make a cast 20 feet here, another 20 feet, another 20 feet. Just drag that bait back to the boat kind of quick. And if you get a bite, mark it and make sure you come back and really thoroughly fish that area. But another area that looks, pretty good if we're just going to, I pulled up on like the ideal spot in my mind for what this looks like. Try to find another one in this creek. Right here. This looks pretty good. Right in here, nice little, again, a little flat bank where it goes 20 foot, and you get this just really, really flat right in here, but it curves around into one of these little bays. This area right in here is going to be really good for those spawning smallmouth bass. A lot of times they will spawn like more around the points than back in the pockets, and that's just because smallmouth are weird. And I don't really get smallmouth, even though I lived up north for a long time. I'm going to try to find one more area just so you guys get a general idea of what I'm looking for. And I've only done this a few times, so I'm not an expert at doing this, but it's something I've done in the past a few times. So again, I'm not going to claim that I'm an expert at that, but like this point right here, again, really flat, and then steepens off. But you can basically see the contour lines really spread apart, and then they drop off, and it's off of kind of a point here. This is another good spawning smallmouth area. So that's pretty much it, guys. There is a ton of other stuff that I could talk about on all these lakes, but I do have one of my one-on-one fishing lessons at 8:30, and so I have a lot of those available that I'm doing right now, and so I want to make sure I can get prepared for that. So I'm going to try to answer a few questions here for the next like 10 minutes, and then I'm going to jump off there. But if you guys do want to schedule a one-on-one fishing lesson or have me look at your personal lake, there is lake breakdowns available, and actually all sold out at the moment. As I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, they sold out in 56 minutes. When I last posted some new ones, I never even posted on social media, which is crazy. And so hopefully I'll have more ability to get more done, but right now I'm keeping it pretty limited just because I want to make sure I can still make the live stream, still make videos, still do personal lessons, and still have time to actually live my life while still working 50 hours a week, full-time job. So basically, you can go to my website, fishthemoment.com, to book any of these lessons with me. The one-on-one virtual lessons I have on my calendar out for a really long time, so you can book those out way far in advance. So you can book them before your tournament, stuff like that. And if you are interested, definitely go book one of those lessons now because they're sold out for the next 3 weeks. And so definitely get those on your calendar. And I also do on-the-water fishing lessons and guided fishing trips, basically. They're not guided fishing trips. It's more me showing you how I break down lakes, how to use your electronics, how to find fish. It's not like I'm going to drop you on the mother lode of fish and we're going to sack them up. We may find the mother lode of fish, but I'm not going to be putting you on all the fish in the world. It's about really teaching you how to find the fish yourself. And so that's all on my website, fishthemoment.com. And then I also have my Patreon page, which is over here on the bottom right corner, where you can join that. $5 donation will allow you to put your lake in for a random drawing to have your lake looked at on my live stream. I'm also thinking about doing a lot more with my Patreon page going forward here, trying to think of perks and things that are easy for me to do with all the other stuff I have going on. So definitely appreciate everyone, though, who does support the channel and donates, and people like Thomas, thank you so much for the $100 super chat today. Really, really appreciate that. It's awesome. And so I know there's a ton of comments in here, so I want to run through that really quick. Josh Hood says, favorite bait for 50 to 53 degree water, 2 to 3 foot of visibility. I would say a jerk bait, a suspending jerk bait, or maybe a jig. Maybe just like a straight up jig is really good. Let me go back up to the top here. There's a lot of people putting laughing faces. I hope that's not about my boat noises or my sneak holes. I'm sure there's some choice comments there. Thank you so much, Jason, for the $50 super chat. Great job as always, Johnny. Thank you for the real knowledge. Appreciate that, Jason. As always, always appreciate the support there. Let's see here. Ton of questions here. Did you notice the effect of colored red kicker chartreuse willow leaf blades on the spinnerbait? Like the last FLW tournament on Grand Lake, the guy, I think it's Jamie Lawyer, I think was his name. He was throwing a all chartreuse blades on his spinnerbaits to make it more visible. And I do really like painted blades when the water temperature is super dirty. I just don't like fishing a spinnerbait that much, to be honest. So instead of using a painted blade on my spinnerbait, I use a painted blade on my chatterbait and actually color the blade black. And I found that makes the world of difference on my chatterbaits. If you have just take a black Sharpie and just Sharpie your blades, it can make a huge difference. And then obviously at night, I love to fish black spinnerbaits with red blades just because it's low visibility. And the same thing applies during the day when you have low visibility in that super dirty water. So yep. I'm also going to be talking about that tournament in my next video. I have some really interesting stuff I want to talk about with Brian Thrift, who kind of fell flat on the last day, which is really surprising because Brian Thrift is like my favorite angler ever because I love his fishing style and I kind of try to emulate his fishing style a little bit. And I was expecting him to just destroy everyone because he's caught like so many limits throughout his I think he had like a streak of like 60 limits in a row or something, and then to only catch one fish on the final day blew me away. But yeah, let's see here. Fishing moment. When will you have open spots for lake breakdowns? I think I just mentioned that, but I will. April 15th is when I'll have more of those available. See here. Artie says, sorry I'm late. Had a school project to work on. Glad you're actually working on the school project rather than just spending time on the live stream, or maybe just taking a break. And then Mark Eric says, no sneak holes for me. Jim saying the boat noises are hilarious. Ari's asking, how can one effectively fish offshore without an expensive depth finder? I'm going to be doing a video on that, hopefully a lot of videos on that in June. Actually, I have my old fish finder, my Humminbird 798, which I bought for like $300 10 years ago, and I'm going to go find offshore fish with that thing. You can probably find one online now for like $100. And so I'll show you guys that's how I learned to find fish was with that graph. I'll show you how I find fish with that thing and how to use it to actually locate the fish and then crush them offshore. And I'll go to a lake where I'm not familiar with offshore fishing, so I'm not like cheating and just taking you to spots I know and then graphing over. That would be that's not helpful to anybody. So you'll just have to kind of believe me on that one though. Johnny Annan predictions on Lake Hartwell starting Thursday. Do you have any favorites for the tournament? Don't really know Hartwell. I would have to pay. I have to kind of see what the conditions are out there and kind of who the field is and everything. I don't know. I have to think about that, JP. Not sure at the moment. Dan saying great river tips, fish moment. Thanks, man. Appreciate that. And then Ray is saying, lol, I fished those areas. So apparently I got somewhere. Rob Roll says he broke a prop in a sneak hole. Nobody ever saw him again. It can happen. It's very true. I guess I wasn't thinking about how I was saying that, but throwing a worm down the sneak hole is this video about. I'm getting into YouTube fishing or into tube fishing this season, and heard a lot of people having trouble losing fish on Texas rig tubes. Have you had trouble with your black neon tube? Yes, I have had trouble losing fish. I actually lost a 4.5 pounder in an Arkansas Junior State tournament, and that was kind of a bummer. I still won the tournament by like 4 pounds, so it didn't really matter at the end of the day. But I would have had like 22 pounds or 20 pounds if I caught that fish. I had like a 12 or a 14 incher in the boat. But yeah, big thing with the fish in the tube, I've tried so many different hooks on the tube, and the two that I really like are. Let me switch over to this just really quick. Show you a little tube hook. So I've been just kind of using a Gamakatsu extra wide gap. 5/0 hook, and that's worked really well for me, to be honest. If we go to some hooks, so hooks that are not too bad. Where are the normal hooks? Is it these? Where was all these weird hooks? Where's just a normal hook? I just want a hook. Here we go. feel like that should be the first thing. But little Gamakatsu extra wide gap is always a really good hook. There we go. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through Tackle Warehouse at this point. I know it's not super riveting for everyone. Here we go, Gamakatsu offset EWG. I'll just use this hook in a 5/0 with a 4.5 inch flipping tube. I'll throw a 4.5 inch flipping tube with a 5/0 Gamakatsu offset. That works super well. The other hook that I will use that's a little bit more specialized, if we can find one, is not here. Maybe it's here. Give me 1 second, guys. I know when I always go through Tackle Warehouse, you guys just love that because it's just me scrolling through a web page. But bear with me for 1 second. Oh, no, I can't. 1 second. Tube hook. Let me do this. Maybe this will work. Search engine. Oh, yes. Good job, Tackle Warehouse. Okay, so here's the hook I like to use. This is the Laser Trocar tournament tube hook. This hook is awesome. It has that super extra wide gap. I'll throw it in the 4 or the 5/0 size, and they're really sharp. They work really well. I don't really like trocar hooks that much because these barbs will actually punch a hole in the fish's mouth, and it'll create a giant hole in their mouth, and the hook will come out a lot of times. So I don't like the trocar hooks in general. I like Gamakatsu hooks just because they don't actually cut the fish's mouth as much as these, like he's surgically sharpened or whatever. But if you're using a really kind of soft tipped rod, even if it's like a 7-foot heavy action flipping stick, 7'6" heavy action flipping stick, if it has a lot of bend to the tip, it will help using these type of hooks. As long as it has a bunch of backbone, it's fine if you have a lot of tip to your flipping sticks. But if you're using a really stout flipping stick, like a 7'11", super heavy action rod, stuff like that, these hooks can really mess up the fish's mouth. So I don't like that, but that's kind of what I do there. Let's see here. My top spinner is saying, does anyone know what type of Google Maps Johnny's using? I'm using Google Earth Pro. Oh, everyone's got that. Perfect. Appreciate that. And then B. Saunders saying you should do an FLW breakdown in Grand Lake, Oklahoma. I could definitely do that. I don't know why, but people don't like my tournament breakdowns. I get like no views on all my tournament breakdowns. I know everyone in the comments, I get the best like to dislike ratios on my tournament breakdowns. I love doing them, but no one watches them. Like, I don't know if you guys are like holding out and you're like, oh, this is really good information. I'm not sharing this with anybody or what's going on. But like my tournament breakdown videos get a third of the views of all my other videos. Maybe because they're so specific. I don't really know. But anyways, let's see here. Boat running noises are free. Thanks, Michael. And then Thomas says, boat noises are free. Sneak holes, maybe not. Okay, so more questions. Thanks for review of both Shoals, Dan. No problem. Let's see here. Oh, skipped on me 1 second. Artie's asking, do you ever fish French fries? Yes, I'll fish them right now this time of year on a Carolina rig. I love fishing a French fry on a Carolina rig this time of year. And then Alan says, do you fish French fries? And he says, I fish them out of the bottom of the bag when I'm driving. Took years to perfect. That's good. And then JP saying, thanks for the real knowledge with the puns. And then Justin Cook is saying, great meeting you and talking fishing over a few beers of the classic. Thanks again for the great information. Great to meet you too, Justin. It was great meeting everyone at the Bassmaster Classic and at the meetups. Hoping to do more of that where I can actually go around the country and do meetups and meet you guys. Super fun when everyone was able to join, and hopefully I can give some more notice next time so people can actually get prepared for that. But I'm kind of like we kind of took over this pizza place. It was really cool just talking fishing with everyone. Braid to fluoro or straight fluoro for drop shot setup. I always throw braid to fluoro on my spinning rods nowadays just to eliminate line twist. And then my top spinner says, would you throw a spinnerbait and a chatterbait in clear water with 5+ feet of visibility? I would if I have cloudy, windy conditions. If there's cloudy, windy conditions, I love throwing a spinnerbait and a chatterbait, especially if there's any type of cover like trees or if you have some sort of grass in the water. For sure, if you can find cover and you have wind and clouds, you're good to go. And then JP saying, thank you for the answer to the question. see, here's so many questions. Love the videos. Loving your videos, learning a lot. That's Melvin. Thank you. Appreciate that. Sorry for not getting to everyone, by the way. There's so many comments, it's hard to get to everyone. Bassing with classes. How does the moon phase affect bass? Honestly, I have no idea. The moon phase, there's people who say like the moon is closer to the earth, and so it causes the tides to come in. There's like old guys that talk about that. I mean, that happens on the ocean. I don't know. All I can say about the moon phase is that the moon is out when it's a full moon. It's brighter all night, and so maybe that just gets the fish to want to move up shallower. It's easier for them to see their beds. They can fan the beds easier when it's really bright outside at night, and so it's easier for them to move up and spawn. That's the only reason I can think of. I have no idea. All I know is that those bass will seem to move up during that moon phase, but I really don't pay attention to it. I just fish the moment and when I'm on the water, and I don't really worry about what the moon phase is on a particular day. I just go out and if I find fish on the beds, I find them on the beds, and I can kind of use it as an idea of what the fish might be doing. But I've seen so many times when it's a full moon, the water's 60 degrees, and there's no bass spawning, and so yeah, fish are weird. Let's see here, and then Mark Eric said, just started watching. Appreciate you joining and starting to watch the videos. Then the lake temperature dropped 10 degrees in 2 days. I was on top of fish on main lake points. Fish were feeding, but I couldn't get them to bite. Any suggestions? So the lake temperature dropped 10 degrees. You were trying to fish them on main lake points. I'm assuming vertical fishing. This is Ulysses. I would try to look for some sort of brush or some sort of cover. When the water temperature drops that dramatically, you want to find steeper banks, steeper areas with some sort of cover that's going to stay warm. So that's rocks, that's wood, or that's grass. So look for steeper water off those main lake points. Find the steeper main lake points or points with a really steep drop off the end. And then look for big boulders, big brush piles, standing timber, stuff like that, that's going to hold more heat, and that will help you out there. Hopefully that will help. It's kind of hard to say just off of the limited information about what you're doing there. Then Ken saying, definitely do tournament breakdown videos. They're great. Keep up the good work, Johnny. Appreciate that. And then Arky fan says, love the tourney breakdowns as well, which is awesome. And then Therminator saying, what's up, Johnny? How's it going? And then Vaden Ellis says, the other week I won a tournament with 2 7-pounders thanks to your videos. That's awesome. That's so cool. I really appreciate that. It's great to hear a bunch of guys catching fish with what I'm sharing. And then Thomas Bonner says, thanks again. Thank you so much, Thomas, again for the super chat and for joining Patreon and all the support. And then Rusty says, if you have breakoffs on hook sets, what can you do to adjust? Two things I would do if you're breaking off on hook sets: either your knot is bad or your line is bad. That's all I can say on that. If you're breaking off on hook sets, I mean, unless you're setting the hook like you're trying to kill the fish, I don't think that's going to be too much of a problem. If it's a break off on hook set, it's either you're fishing bad lines, so you're fishing like cheap fluorocarbon, you're not retying enough where you'll have nicks in your line, or your knot is bad. And so either just retie more often if you're fishing around rocks, buy some better line, so better fluorocarbon. I like the Seaguar Invisex is my favorite fluorocarbon. It's not super expensive, but it works really well. Or then try to tie a better knot. And I'm going to make videos on what knots I tie, hopefully, later on. And then I'm going to take one more question here, and I have to jump because I have to get to a lesson at 8:30. My type swimmer says, do you fish for crappie? I do not fish for crappie purposely, though I catch a ton of crappie just fishing offshore for bass. And so I know where lots of crappie live, and I know what they look like on my graph now, just because I graph over, I'll make casts, and I catch a ton of big crappie, like 2.5 pound crappie, like giant crappie all the time. And it's because I'm just fishing for bass with bass lures. And so I never keep them or anything. I just throw them back because I just catch like 1 or 2 at a time. Yeah, I never really go purposely crappie fishing. And then Vaden says, can you do Baits 101 videos? That's something I definitely want to start doing. I know there's a ton of them on YouTube in general. I know I was going to answer one more question, but I try not to do a lot of videos like everyone has on YouTube because there's so much of that content out there already. I try to make stuff that's very different from what's already out there because if I'm going to spend 10 to 15 hours editing a video, I might as well make it unique so that you guys get some different information. And there's a lot of good information on baits and good information on a lot of stuff out there already. So hoping to add something new to the YouTube community rather than just duplicating stuff that I know will get views. Because I know if I do a top 5 fishing lures for fall fishing, it's going to get a ton of views. And I do my top 4 baits for muddy water, things like that, and I did that, and that got a ton of views. And I liked that video because it was very specific for what I like, but I don't want to just do top 5 bait videos because those get hundreds of thousands of views, but there's a ton of them out there, and most people have covered that topic to death. So anyways, thank you all for joining the live stream. Got 156 people still on the stream, which is awesome. I gave really late notice on this one, so apologize. I'm going to try to get better at giving better notice on these live streams rather than just randomly throwing up the live stream and announcing it 5 minutes before I start. So hopefully you guys will be able to catch that. But I do live streams every single Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Time. And so definitely come back next week. We'll have 3 more lakes from my Patreon subscribers, and we will be able to hopefully help you guys find some more fish this spring. So thank you again for watching. Thank you so much to Thomas and Jason for the super chats, and thanks to Thomas, Justin, and Dan for their lake recommendations on my Patreon page. And just thank you guys as always for always talking in the comments and always being here to support me. So thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.